Thanks for coming into this session. As you would know from your programs, it's about getting the most out of your releases. As Pete said, I'm the general manager of AIR. AIR is an organisation that looks after independent record labels, and we speak to a lot of self-releasing artists, and it's something that we see time and time again. I suppose artists or small labels who put a hell of a lot of effort into the release of a song or a single or an album, and then are sort of stuck for ideas and inspiration in terms of actually how to get it out to people and what they want to do with that release. So that's what we're going to talk to you about today. We are missing a speaker, but that's fine. They've taken, I don't even have to mention them because they've been taken off the slide. We've got a great panel. We have an experienced dynamic artist on my far left with Claire Bowditch.
Hi everyone, how are you?
This is good call and response too.
It's amazing, you guys.
Maggie Collins.
Hello.
And Vanessa Basili.
Hello.
So what I thought I'd do is because, Claire, a lot of people know you, Claire, but
right.
Can you also, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us, maybe I read Claire's Wikipedia page this morning, so I'll know it all, but maybe you could go through this, particularly from the, from the angle of what you've done throughout your career. A couple of minutes summation of your entire career musically would be fantastic, so we know where you're coming from.
Great, let's have some me time, ladies and gentlemen. So, my name's Claire Bowditch and I am a musician. I started my musical career when I was 16 years old, and I started singing backups for my brother-in-law's band around Brunswick Street in a little a cappella with some friends, and I went to a school that encouraged all of that, which was lovely. The point being, I didn't know how to take the musical career side seriously, and I refused to, in fact, for many, many years. I thought that there was something about trying to be a successful musician that would somehow kill my muse, the part of me that wanted to create and be free. What I realised was I had a whole lot of fears around that, and I hung on to them really tightly. And I used to write songs. I quit the backup singing band, but in my heart I knew that I was here to write songs and sing them. And yet, it wasn't until I went overseas, did some open mics when no one was there, learnt to play a couple of chords, wrote songs, recorded them on tapes, hid them under my bed, said I'd never share them with anyone. And then was one day encouraged to do an open mic, did one, and the feeling of playing my songs was incredible. And I knew then that I had to start facing some of the fears that I had. I thought that if you were successful and signed a record contract, that was the end of your life. I thought that if you made money, that was bad. I thought that, I had a whole lot of things around basically my fear of stepping up and doing the thing that I was born to do in the world. So I say this as an opening just to move into the next part, which is how did I get the best out of my releases, which is something we're going to talk about today. So I have released apparently 5 EPs, 7 albums.
According to Wikipedia.
Say that again?
Yeah, according to
Wikipedia, something like that, and they're probably right. So many that sometimes it's hard to keep track. Now the first 2 were with my band Red Raku. Me and John Hedigan, songwriter, we wrote the songs, we recorded them in the bedroom, really strong community radio support, but again I was not ready to talk about career at that stage. I was not ready to get serious. My bandmates would set up meetings with people from record companies and I just wouldn't show up because I was terrified. I know this might sound ridiculous to you, Jenners, but I just thought, how can you have a career and keep your integrity and do it all? And, how can you be successful but not lose what it is that's your connection to your art? So gradually what I was doing was an apprenticeship, and I had to get really used to knowing what was good music and what I thought was good. So one of the first things that we all need for a release that works is to do the best work that we and only we can do. So to really concentrate on that very first foundation step, which is doing your apprenticeship, learning how to make great music, watching idols, not those kind of idols, going to lots of shows, just putting yourself out there, taking little creative risks. So that's the foundation, and that's probably where I'd start.
Cool, thank you. Now, Maggie, can you tell us about the artists that you work with and what you do, so we know where you come from?
Alrighty, so Claire just said that you thought that making money was bad, and that's what I thought as well, so that's why I became a band manager. So I thought the more I suffered, the better I am as a person. This is sad. But anyway,
Can we just ask, like, just the camera isn't on you, just as a random note, is there anyone here who sort of has that sneaking suspicion? Can I just have a little show of hands? Is there anyone here who's kind of had that thing about you can't be an artist and make money? Anyone? Yeah. Let's be really honest. Great. So lots of people in the room. It's just one of those hidden things. It's nice to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess
it's
so.
Great to be
true. So I started out, I wanted to be an actor one day. So I went to went to uni and I did acting, but then I realised I wanted to be in the music industry, so I went to TAFE and I did band management there, and I kind of realised that's where I kind of wanted to do. And then, discovered this band called the John Steele Singers, who had some incredible music, and thankfully, the social media side hadn't really launched much then. There was just MySpace, and not many people had really heard of their songs, so I kind of heard it and hit them up and asked to manage them, and they said yes, which was really nice. So then eventually I just got into DZ Death Rays. They said yes. Actually, when I saw them play, it was at the Zoo in Brisbane, and they absolutely blew my mind. My jaw was dropped to the floor when I was watching them play, but then at the last song of the gig, Simon was on drums. They're just a two-piece, and they're got a really loud live sound. But on the last song, a guy walked on stage and put a bike helmet on Simon's head, who was drumming, and it had a strobe light taped to the top of the head of the helmet. So he's drumming away while the strobe light is absolutely flashing and going nuts while he's playing. That was really amazing. So that's that moment where, you know, all the work that you spend in front of an Excel spreadsheet, that's when you realise this is why I'm doing it. You get that fire in your belly and you love your bands, and so that's what I do. I manage those bands.
Thank you. Vanessa, you want to tell us what you do?
Yes, I am a publicist, and I guess what does a publicist do? A publicist is hired by bands, labels, managers on behalf of bands sometimes, and touring companies to effectively promote tours and releases. A release could be a single, EP, album. A publicist puts together a press plan and implements that to get exposure for an artist across a multitude of media platforms. Exposure and coverage could encompass artist interviews, reviews of live performances and releases, a million peripheral publicity opportunities that are out there.
And what artists do you work with?
I work with, my primary artists are local artists,
okay.
Loon Lake and Ainsley Wills.
Okay.
I also work on
I love Ainsley Wills. She's so
She's
awesome.
amazing, isn't she?
Yeah, she's great. Is she here?
No, she's
Ainsley,
not.
you owe me $25.
And I also work with a lot of international bands on releases and tours. Last year was a very heavy year for me in terms of my clients. They were mostly internationals, but this year I've made it a focus to work on local independent bands.
Cool. So we were talking before this panel started about what, I suppose, what do you want to get out of a release? And one thing we all agreed on was that whatever music you're releasing at a given time, it's not, it's not an end unto itself. You don't release music for the sake of just putting that music out into the public. You have to see each particular release as a means to achieving what you want further down in the track in your career. It's a means to an end, and it's not an end in itself. So what would be really great is, I want to talk about DZ, Death Rays, for a minute, because I first came across them on a YouTube video where they just basically were having a drinking session. It was a 2.5 minute bender, and I think that kind of went viral. And do you want to tell us about that? And I suppose the strategy behind all that sort of stuff.
Well, actually, I actually saw that and witnessed it myself. Actually, that's how they did that before I came on board. But that is when you've got, that is a result of when you've got no money, and then creativity is forced into being, because when you've got money, you can do all sorts of different things to market your band, by spending the money. But when you don't have it, you have to find some other way to do it. So, I saw that too, and I thought it was pretty disgusting and awesome. If you haven't seen it, you have to have a strong stomach to see it at the end. They drink and then spew, pretty much. So, yeah. But I mean, from that, we did have a bit of a benchmark that we had to take care of then in terms of film clips and their kind of style. And I really cannot take credit for a lot of the creative stuff that's happened in the marketing aspect of DZ Death Ray's career. But what I have done is ensured that we have a team of people who are creative. Being a manager and doing all the stuff that I do, I don't always have the time to have a bird's eye view of it all and actually do, spend time really thinking of these ideas. But what I can do is make sure that, we have teams that are doing that. So eventually, DZ put an EP out through this Brisbane label. Sorry, just remembered something funny that happened with the Brisbane label. Anyway,
you can tell
it didn't go too well.
It's being filmed, I'll just remind you, and probably going out live telecast, so don't mention
You
names.
signed a form saying you wouldn't swear and you wouldn't talk about drugs, and...
Can I talk about body parts?
If you want, yeah.
Well, I don't know. This could have been a genius marketing ploy that I turned the artist down. But anyway, we had artwork due for this first EP with this label, and on the day that the artwork was due to go to the printers so that the EP would actually come out in time for the gigs, we got this artwork, and previously, like 2 days earlier, the artist had sent us an email saying, hey, gonna get the artwork ready for you, it's gonna be really good, I'll have it for you on the day that it's due. And we're all like, great, we trust you. And he writes back and he says, cool, because hope you like veiny dicks with top hats and bow ties. And we thought it was a pretty funny joke in the email. And then we opened up the artwork on the day that it was due, and it was big veiny dicks with top hats and bow ties. So we could have gone through with that, but we thought it was our first release, so we had to make him change it on the day.
Didn't want to set the benchmark too high early on. It can be a problem.
So that was that, and that was a lot of fun for the first release. But after that, we were looking for a different label, and we found this really cool DIY small label called IOU, which is headed by a creative marketing genius, Johan. I'm not sure if he's here. He might not be here. I don't know. Johan, so he heads up IOU, and he comes up with heaps of different fantastic ideas. And I think one of the best ideas that he came up with for us, which has kind of been worth so much money in, indirect money in terms of how far it can reach, was the film clip that we did with Aj Barker, because he was watching this film clip by Paul Simon, which had Chevy Chase in it. You Can Call
Love
Me
that
Al.
one, yeah.
Yeah, so it's them in a pink room and kind of playing instruments and stuff like that. So he just had an idea to do a spin-off of that, except originally he wanted to use... He was saying that DZ would be Paul Simon and that Harold from Neighbours was going to take on the role as Chevy Chase. We hit up Harold, and he considered it. He really considered it, but he declined. But then we hit up Aj Barker, and he was into it. So we did this film clip with Aj, and then it got posted on the Flight of the Conchords Facebook page, which has like 1-point-something million likes, and we're just like, oh, this is the biggest thing that's ever happened to us, so that's really cool.
So it's pretty interesting because the big boosts in that band's career came in setting up each release with a really shareable video. Like that's how because they weren't just live videos, there was concept behind it. And it kind of looks like they don't care, but obviously they're really thinking behind.
Well, DZ are the creative ones when it comes to the music, but we are all as creative with the marketing and the business as they are with their music. And that's the fun part, because, you know, it's art in itself, actually putting your stuff out there and finding, you know, you've got the music and you're like, great, now what are we going to do to put all our assets around it? So what kind of videos, competitions, online kind of posts are we going to build around this? And let's have fun with it. Let's, you know, create something, a video, a live session in a studio, an actual film clip, a video of them saying hello to their fans or something. Because the biggest thing is that not only in music, but in life and whatever career you have to be proactive. You can't just sit back and say, well, we've made the release and it's been distributed now and twiddle the thumbs. You can't do it.
Cool. So Claire, do you want to talk to us about, I suppose, your development from an indie artist who was scared to make money to, you know, getting signed
A
to
billionaire. Yeah.
I was getting
You
safe
sold
to getting
out,
signed
yeah.
but to a major and then releasing albums and winning ARIA awards, right? It'd be really great to, I suppose, trace those early releases and how they actually, you know, how each one took you step by step to where you are.
It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Next year I'm launching this new enterprise called Big Hearted Business, which is about helping right-brainers and left-brainers build a bridge between the two. I just think these are the times where creative and business, business and life, life and art, like everything's in a state of convergence in every platform, in every form of media. And old models are dying, new models are being built, and these people in the room are the people building them, and these people I'm sharing the panel with. So I think that's something interesting to note, but I'll just take that back a little. For me, my idea from very, very early on, knowing the kind of person that I was, is that I just had this really clear idea that I probably wasn't going to take my clothes off for a film clip. You know, I just knew that about myself, people. It's just one of those things. So
is that, metaphorically or?
No, literally. And, you know, when I was 16, which is, you know, a little while ago now, that the kind of models of success, particularly for women in music, were Courtney Love. You know, so you're either extremely, you know, damaged, which was exciting, or perhaps you were someone like Kylie Minogue, who you were highly sexualised. I couldn't see who I was going to be in there. The women that I was relating to were from a generation or two before me. So Patti Smith, Laurie Anderson, Joni Mitchell. You know, there were Kirsty Stegwasi, there were other people in the scene, there were the Clouds. But, you know, when I was a teenager, I just couldn't find it. So what I always knew was that I wanted to be a long-term artist. So I knew I would continue to make music until I was 70, 80 and 90. I was in it for life. That was about all I knew. And that was about as much as I wanted to ask myself at that stage. But it meant that it helped me work out what I wanted to do early on. So this idea of apprenticeship really appealed to me. I knew that I wanted to support the acts that I admired. You know, I didn't imagine that would extend to people like Leonard Cohen, but I thought perhaps one day Paul Kelly or, you know, Cat Power. And so I kind of had an idea of where the kind of person that I was, the kind of music that I was making. And that helped me work out the kind of career that I had. So I didn't need to come on the scene with a big bang. I just wanted to kind of eke on in. And so when it came to releasing my first single, I think a mistake that a lot of bands do is one that we tried to avoid. So we released an album called Autumn Bone, but before we released Autumn Bone, no one had ever really heard of us except in community radio. I, at that stage, had turned the corner in terms of my relationship with the idea of having my career as a thing that I loved. So I'd become a mother, basically. You know, I was pregnant, and I was like, if I don't do this now and take this seriously, I'm going to be a bitter 45-year-old one day who wishes I'd had the guts to try and make my living out of my music. And it was exciting to me that I didn't see anyone else. I didn't know Sarah Blasco, I didn't know Missy Higgins, I didn't know Ainsley Wills. You know, I didn't know any other women who were doing it our way. So there was a bit of a zeitgeist. A whole lot of us were thinking this way. What I had seen was Ani DeFranco. She'd been doing things her own way. So I thought, we start off where we want to be, because I can't imagine having the kind of release that I want through a record label at this stage in history. And then, so our first album, Autumn Bone, we did a single, we did a small show, it sold out, the story started being told. We got some great early reviews from Beat and Impress. We started adding them to our next round of publicity, basic stuff, you know, it's just like linking the chain, letting people get to know you. You find your little champions. So, you know, Richard Kingsmill started playing one of our singles. Richard Moffat had been playing it here in community radio. And slowly you're in the world of making relationships. Now, some people call this networking. I never knew what that word meant. I just knew, as John Watson, you know, explained it so beautifully once to me, you're hanging around people that you find interesting. You're watching their music, you're having discussions with them. You're asking them how you can contribute to their career. You're telling your friends about them. You know, these are like, I see something that your band loves. I love tweeting out to the rest of the world that they're, you know, doing something exciting. We're always pointing the finger to something else that's exciting, and by doing that, we're letting people know who we are as well. So one of the things about getting the most out of your release, knowing who you are and letting people see who you are, but also having a big, long-term strategic idea. This word strategy, again, can be a dirty word, but for me, I knew in 5 years' time, this is what I want to be doing. I didn't say in 5 years' time I want to win an ARIA award or I want to be Rolling Stone Woman of the Year. Those things are not part of what excites me. I'm like, in 5 years' time, I want to be making this kind of music. I want to be a diverse artist. I want to be always maintaining the right to contradict myself musically and try new things. So to let people know you early on with a single or an EP is a really standard sort of way of doing things before you release your big ticket item, which is your album. A lot of work goes into an album, you know. You don't want to just plonk it there. And Maggie's point about being proactive is absolutely essential. So I had to be, I'll just move on to the second point, which is how I became signed, etc. I had to be very sure of who I was, set my own culture, have my own kind of touring adventures before anyone else in the industry would take any notice of me. I didn't get them to notice me by doing a tap dance in front of them. I got them to notice me by doing the best work that I could do, telling the funniest stories that I could tell on stage and setting that world, making that world intact. Does that make sense, you guys? Is that kind of, yeah. So I was playing, the problem was for me that I was losing a lot of money. So I was having this apparently successful career. I was selling out venues around Australia, small ones. We were doing really well as independent artists. We were right at the top of those charts, etc. And yet I couldn't muck around anymore because I was a mother. You know, you don't need to be a mother to be this sort of earnest. You can actually say to yourself, I don't need to muck around because I'm an artist. And I'm proud of being an artist. But for me, what I needed was, you know, to make me feel serious about it was, I'm a mother. I have a responsibility. I've got to find a better way to do this. And so I did NEIS, New Enterprise Incentive Scheme. I wrote a business plan, which was in a language that I didn't understand, but I did these things because I wanted to start learning. Then I was getting paid $250 to do a gig in Queensland. And out of that $250, I paid my airfare, my accommodation, which was supposed to be provided, but they'd forgotten that night, my car hire, my sound guy, my gear hire, etc. So I was really down. And I was just sitting there in the chai tank going, how the fuck am I going to make this work? And where am I going to sleep also? And then this organiser behind me started talking, and I just played just below the main act on this stage, and she said, well, you know, you can crash at my house tonight. I said, oh, great, thanks, man. And then she said, she was on the management committee for the festival, and she said, you know, the main act, like, he got paid, I think it was 30 grand to play today. And I went, what? People get paid 30 grand to play a show? Wow, there's gold in them hills. Like, you know, there's some. So I started not being shy about asking questions around that. And I kept playing, and I realised that for me, I was going to have to either tour endlessly and drag my family around the world 52 weeks of the year, or we could drag ourselves around 25 weeks of the year, and I could partner with a major, and I could license my album to them. So I got lucky because a guy called John O'Donnell came to one of my shows, a little tiny show in Sydney. He was the head of EMI at the time, and I think I kind of became a bit like his love project. I was probably never necessarily going to be the act who, at that stage and that time, sold 700,000 records. It was more, that was Powderfinger's territory at that stage. But point being, I said to them, he said, we want to work with you. And I said, I want to work with you too, but I'm scared of majors. And he said, listen, majors are changing. And I said, what about a licensing deal? I own my recordings, you do the publicity. And so that worked really beautifully for me. I got a really decent advance, and I broke out of the cycle of just going, how are we going to do this well? And I started talking to experts about it.
Cool. Good
Does
story.
that make sense, guys?
So, I think I thought of a good analogy for what each release within terms of a career is, and I thought of Buffy because I used to love the show.
Nice.
Right? And I think it's 7 series, and there's this great overarching arc over the 7 series, the whole story from start to finish, and then each series. So that's like the whole thing where she ends up, beating the Hellmouth and all that sort of stuff. And then there's in each series there's like a little arc, or quite a big arc because it's like 12 episodes or something. So 12 episodes. So they beat like the boss or the boss witch or the boss, or I can't remember the characters' names. So you got big arc, and then you got 7 little story arcs. And then inside that, each episode, you could just watch any Buffy episode because you didn't really have to know what had happened before or after.
Yeah.
And it was contributing to the little story arcs, but they actually standalone story arcs. So
This is such a great, beautiful point, though. Like, what story are you going to tell first?
yeah,
That's something perhaps that you would know a lot about being a publicist, but they're all little stories interconnected with bigger stories.
Yeah,
which
and if
creates
you-
a world,
you understand that the little story arc, which might be the gig that you're playing tonight, is part of the release strategy, which is the medium story
Such a
arc,
good
which is
point.
part of a career, which is the whole 7 series until you beat the Hellmouth. So, okay. So, so we might talk about. I'd like to talk about some nuts and bolts about actually how you plan, because it takes a lot of planning, the publicity and marketing in and around a release, right? So at what point in time do you sit down, say, with the manager of Loon Lakes, and from that point, how does the process go? Can you take us through that?
Okay, well, primarily I work very closely with bands or their managers because to get the best out of a release, you have to have a great team behind you and a passionate team who believe in the overall, as you said, like the main arc and the little arcs as well. So what we'll do is we'll sit down, and the manager of, Loon Lake, for instance, will approach me and say, okay, this is what we have planned for the year. And we'll sort of break it down into releases and associated tours, and then sort of work backwards from dates that we lock in. So a release date will determine when I will start approaching media and sort of putting feelers
So do you want to give us some concrete figures, like how, like if you wanted to get covered in, say, like the Rolling Stone, if you wanted an album release, right? At what point do you go to them with Loon, or Loon Lake's last EP? Like at what point in time do you go?
Yeah, well, they're a monthly media outlet, so they're what we would call a long lead media outlet, and you can approach them, 2 months in advance.
Yeah.
Before a release date.
Yeah, we can release, like, sometimes it's 5 months in advance.
Yeah.
It can be crazy.
And
long
sometimes
time.
it's good for key media to have a release quite early on in the piece, because it just gives you enough, or as long a lead time as possible, to be able to follow them up and get their feedback on that particular release.
Yep.
It's really important from the outset to sort of be able to, as Claire said earlier, identify your champions and the people that are going to run with that release. So long lead media, generally a couple of months in advance, you would be approaching them. Daily newspapers, I would probably say, give them even 6 weeks to a month.
Okay.
Because there is a lot of competition out there, and all media are quite limited in what they can run. There are only so many pages and so much space every week that, publicists bands who are doing it on their own, labels are all vying for that same limited space.
Yeah.
Street press is quite a short lead time, but also, be mindful that they have deadlines as well, and they need the extra time to be able to absorb.
Cool. And what about, I think Air's engagement with you is through our blog, which we do like a feature artist and a few stories and interviews, and and makes me think you're fairly comprehensive, because it's just I always think that no one really cares about our blog, but you make the effort, and a lot of other publicists do, to go out to us, and you follow up. So what about online, and how do you manage that?
It's definitely, online is really important. Eventually, as much as, we love picking up a paper, and inevitably that's going to be a redundant media, unfortunately. And I think whether it takes a few years or, a few decades, who knows, everything will eventually go online. So blogs, you guys are important to us, because I deal with a lot of independent local bands, and that is a no-brainer. It's a really great fit for the artists that I work with, and even if we can't get anything happening, even if you guys don't make them a feature artist on the blog, at least that contact is never. At least that contact is making you aware that this artist is out there. While you might not necessarily be able to run something at the time that I approach you, you're at least aware of their presence and what they're doing.
You guys hear what Vanessa's saying there? It's just this key point that we'll come back to again and again and again. So what seeds are you sowing right now? Who are you talking to? Who are you offering to contribute to, in the hope that you'll start a relationship with them, and that at some time in the future, and this is what, relates to getting supports with people, this relates to getting publicity with people, this relates to getting them to buy your album, come to your shows, all of these things. It all starts in the spaces of, A, what culture have you created in your own world? What intact creative culture do you have? Are you offering them? And how are you sowing the seeds early on?
And no is okay.
That's right.
I know it's really hard, and sometimes, because I'm very closely involved with all the bands that I work with, which probably isn't the best way to do it. But when
Women
someone,
always say this, every female manager, every female publicist I've ever, like, we're so close, too close probably.
Yeah, but when someone says no, you can't help but take it a little bit personally, and you think, but why? And but they deserve to be there, and they're such an amazing band, and they really deserve to be on there, other than this band. But no is okay, and it just teaches you to be creative, because there's always going to be another outlet, and rather than focusing on that no, which inevitably we all get, even publicists, as much as we try not to get a no, we get a no.
You've got to get totally used to no, don't you?
Yeah, well, that point that you made, the point that you made about actually sowing the seed, it's like any time you actually put your name out there, posters, for example, I don't really know if anyone's ever looked at a poster and said, oh my God, I'm going to put that in my diary. Well, I'm sure it's happened, but that's not every single poster you see. That doesn't happen each time. But the point is that, you're reminding people that you exist. And I double up as a presenter on Triple J. So I'm on the radio, and I get approached by a lot of people for feedback for their music. And I'm not, there are so many bands out there, and it's really exciting. I love digging for new music, and I love hearing a new name, and I just think, just going to earmark that one, I'll just remember that, or if I have time, obviously, I'll go listen to them. If it doesn't stick in my head straight away, it's there for when someone else mentions it.
What's that rule that they say, something like you need to see something in 4 different places often in order for you to be prompted to go and purchase the album. Is that right? Has anyone heard that theory? 7 touch points. Gosh, just getting higher and higher. I see. Great. So this is thanks for that. So it used to be that you need to see places in 3, someone in 3 places. It might be Beat, it might be a poster, and then it might be hearing them on Triple R, for example. And now they're saying it's 7. So the question again is, what story do you want to tell, and how do you?
Yeah, that Buffy theory is, I love it, and
Thanks.
and that's I've thought that entire time that it's not the big decisions that you make that are really going to have an effect on where you end up. It's the little ones every single day, which is like managing bands every single day. I've actually always got that thought in the back of my mind that even saying yes to this one little email, what is that contributing to in a big picture? Am I will this end up, if I say yes, 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 no, yes, or if I say yes, yes, no, no, yes, what different path are we going to take?
I actually have another analogy. Are you ready?
Do it.
This is my favourite. I've practiced it a few times. The biggest audience that I've ever had.
Do you want to stand
it.
up? Or
No, I'm happy I got to
yeah.
say. It's exactly what we're just talking about, and it's all. It's my spider web theory, okay? And I think someone else told it to me, and and I can't remember who, so I can't credit that person.
I'm
So
pretty sure
if
it's
this
me.
goes on the internet and someone wants to claim it, I apologise, but I extrapolate quite a long way when I tell you. So imagine a spiderweb frame. I know a spiderweb's normally they start with a line through the middle and then the frame goes like later. But you only need to pretend that this spider did a big kind of hexagonal thing to start, right? And then everyone, fans, industry people that you're going to be working with, radio people, everyone just pass in and out through that spiderweb every day, and they don't get caught because it's just a frame, right? And then one day Maggie plays your song on Triple J, and like a big strand for the web goes through the middle. But no one really gets caught in it because it's like they've just heard the song once. There's a strand there, but like you can avoid that if you're going in and out of the spider web. But then what happens is that maybe after hearing it, someone like tweets about it or does it, and like a tiny little strand goes off there.
Another strand.
Yeah.
Genius. This is good.
Yeah, thanks. But then,
And then
you send it.
Then what happens?
It gets played on Triple R, and like a few more lines like that, and you get some coverage in the blogs, like who the hell do that, and you get more tweets and stuff. So little strands, and all of a sudden, whoever's travelling on that part gets caught because there's enough strands around that area.
But also, you strengthen your strands, just to add a little add-on.
Yeah.
Is next time again, back to this, how do you tell your story / market? So Maggie is in pitching for the big day out, and hasn't mentioned she works at Triple J, and there's a little strand saying a song got played on Triple J. And then when she says, well, the song's been played on Triple J, plus they've supported X, Y, and Z, then you're strengthening the strands every time. You're retelling the story.
Yeah, and also every time. So what it basically means is that every time you even talk to someone about your band, you're creating a new little strand. And every time someone even talks about your band that you don't even know there's a strand getting created somewhere else. And it's your aim to basically, and the publicist's aim, and the manager's aim, and the artist's aim, to actually fill that web or facilitate the filling of that web by other people
Like
as many
Flume,
times as
for
possible.
example, exactly. And then you start to realise that there's, what they call the buzz around the store, the band, etc. But recently the JBC, everyone's having a chat. Someone mentions the word Flume, and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, that's going to be huge." Like everyone already knows about it before it's the album, the band and the album, before it's been released, and it gets to a point of critical mass where they're starting to establish a reputation, a name, call it whatever you want. Well, people are excited about them, okay? And that brings the level of possibility for you up to here, for example. And, for many, many bands, it just goes
and you know what?
afterwards.
Some of the things that makes it go down is that they didn't take advantage of it while they were
So
up there.
sad.
Which,
Not that they didn't, but, that happens.
Yeah, exactly. Like it could have been any reason that happened. Like they had worked so hard to get to that point that they were literally burnt out, and they're just like, we've been touring so much, we've been losing so much money, we've got all this kind of stuff happening, but we've got to write an album or maybe a second album. as the case may be. And it kind of like, they're just like, oh, we've done so much, but in this Australian scene or in any scene really, you just got to keep on going, like keep on releasing.
Yeah, and have everything match up. So one of the things that we did early on in order to get our single, for example, physical paper single, up the top of the pile of journalists was we handmade every single single. We hand-stitched them, we hand-painted them, we made a stamp, we made them beautiful. We put our aesthetic onto our artwork. So this is another way of taking advantage of each and every release, is to do what you would love to see, and then you will somehow, the people who are your audience will find, they'll see the way that you know, think of Blasco, for example, the way her photography and her album artwork, her you know, cover art, you know that she's chosen that. You know that she's a part of that. You feel that when you're looking or engaging with her artwork, it's an extension of her art. It's a really powerful thing. So just little tiny things like that.
Cool. Well, sorry this has been quite an unstructured sort of rambling panel, but I've quite enjoyed it. But
Have you guys enjoyed it? Have you got something from
but
it?
is there anyone have any questions? We've only got about 2 minutes to go.
What?
I know.
Hi, just on your web analogy, what would remove some of those strands? So perhaps the less obvious
Nice one.
The analogy.
What's that?
thing.
What would remove some of the strands from the web analogy?
Oh, what
that
would
you
remove
think
them?
about?
That's
Laziness.
Bad hair, really
I don't-
bad hair.
I don't know what would
seriously.
I don't know what would
I reckon laziness. Just once again, like, you know, if this band is up here and they start going down there, it's if they, not necessarily laziness, they might kind of just be like, oh yeah, you know, we just get everything on a platter now, you know.
Got to maintain the web.
Yeah, so if you don't, there may be some bands that have that mentality, so they, maintain the web, otherwise strands will fall.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
And also remember that those strands aren't necessarily positive, so you want to make sure that all the strands.
right.
So if you have a web full of evil, like bad vibes around a band, someone's going to get caught up in that and realise.
I can't believe you did a McDonald's ad. That was so bad for your web.
Yeah, totally. There you go. Perfect.
Any other questions?
Thanks. Hi, I was just wondering, regarding what you're saying about the seeds and putting things out to media, is there a time when maybe that's not a good idea, in the sense that if something's not ready or it's not quite the right time, people might hear it and then it's sort of like being bad for the web. They have a negative connotation, so next time they see something from that band or artist, they think, oh no, I've seen that before, I know that's not for us.
Yeah, that's, you know, something Vanessa would see all the time. You have to be ready to back. People will know if you're not genuine. So if you're out there, you know, blasting, you know, creating this really fast, exciting, exotic web, and there's no substance to what you do, it's the wrong time to create your web. It's the wrong time. You know, you're planting seeds on a 55-degree day.
And
they're just
also,
gonna die.
I guess it's, you know, going back to the bigger picture, if, you know, just as an example, if you're going on tour or releasing an album, you know, you might be approached by a media outlet to do an interview for the single, which is part of that release. You might want to hold back on that opportunity for the sake of having that run around the album when you would really need it, rather than taking that opportunity when it's presented to you straight away. And sometimes that's a really hard call to make as well, because, you know, obviously you want your release to go as far as it possibly can and do as well as it possibly can. And so grabbing all those opportunities can be quite tempting, to have them all at once. But if you keep in mind the bigger picture and sort of hold off when you need to and take what you can at the appropriate time, it'll just make your life so much easier and be a lot more effective in the whole spectrum of the release.
Yeah. Claire mentioned that people kind of jump into albums pretty quickly, which I've seen some people do. I've seen that happen, and it's kind of just been like, why did you want to do it? And they've kind of been like, well, this is how I felt it was right. And I was like, well, then yeah, you probably needed to look at it and kind of expect that this may have been one of the consequences of it, that people wouldn't really connect with it straight away. And you can release an album if you like. That's awesome. Just go and do it. But you just have to know what the consequences are. Yeah.
Hey guys, I have to call it quits.
Can I just say
unfortunately.
one
Yeah,
small
you
thing?
certainly
Guys,
can.
if you want to continue this conversation, it's something I'll be discussing all of next year, particularly for creative entrepreneurs. My organisation will be called Big Hearted Business. At this stage, we're just in development. I need to hear what people like you want and need in order to have long, deep, rich careers and contribute to the Australian cultural pool in a way that we haven't seen before. So please just come to my website and join the Big Hearted Business mailing list if you're interested in continuing.
Cool, and also go to air.org.au and sign up to that mailing list as well.
It's really good.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.